heard this song recently with BB Rexa performing it in a New Year's Eve Times Square just before the ball dropped. It's a song people really love to sing. It's got a haunting quality that draws you in. It poses some significant questions about the world we share. And when he wrote this song, John Lennon lived in one of the wealthiest cities in the world in a very pricey neighborhood. He enjoyed a privilege most people never will. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. Should he have given those things up to stand for his belief about that? It does make you wonder. And he did give to a number of charities, and that's a good thing. Maybe he was singing the song to himself. So, how would the world be as one? It's a beautiful sentiment. But how would it come about? Such a worldwide fellowship would be populated by men and women who saw themselves as each other's brothers and sisters, who by choice preferred and enjoyed each other's company and care. Mother Teresa observed, "If we have no peace, it's because we've forgotten we belong to each other." As gently as I can, there's another cut on the Imagine album. It's a song called How Do You Sleep? It's a scathing rant on his former writing partner, Paul McCartney. Not quite sure that fits into the brotherhood of man idea too well. But the truth is, John was like all of us, complicated, filled with contradictions, not always apparent to himself. John was born in 1940 during World War II. If the Prime Minister, whose middle name, Winston, John was given, had allowed the Germans to have their way without a fight, then England, and perhaps the world, would have been a very different place. Who knows? Maybe the Beatles never would have happened in that world. And I think it's fair to say that the war gave a young boy a distaste for such things, and it's understandable. People love to sing this song, and they do just that. Imagine a better world. It's a good and perhaps even noble thing to wish for. Yet, perhaps it's more noble, powerful, and useful to look in the mirror and learn to be as one with the real people in your own life today. And I don't know about you, I don't find that quite so easy. Simple as an idea, maybe, but definitely not easy. It takes practice. The other day, I came across a website which hosts debates on various questions of importance, and I came across this question: are humans the greatest mistake made by nature? I want to share a few of the thoughts that I found there. The first one is, now, I'm not really a religious person, but you would hear some people say that God gave us a purpose, which is to love and care for everyone, including animals. But we're corrupted by anger, jealousy, greed, and hate. Examples include rape, animal and child abuse, gambling, human and sex trafficking, shootings, breaking and entering, all kinds of theft, and every other crime known to man. I know we're capable of fulfilling that purpose, but those negative emotions we express have and can easily overtake our moral standards if only nature were a little more careful. There's another one. I want to make it clear that even though I think humanity is largely useless, I believe that we can accomplish great things if we reduce the large numbers of useless people. If we separate the cream, we can get to great heights and save nature too. Another reflection. Humans destroy everything. We're blessed with an intelligent mind, but we are also very selfish. The big problem of a human life is we should care more about ourselves or the rest of us. If you're kind of strong, it's then quite easy to force your selfish view on others. As a result, destruction, violence, pollution, killings, suffering occur all the time. Most of times the perpetrators get away with that by saying, "I'm sorry." I think it's too late to fix anything now. We've gone much too far. Here's one that's short and sweet. Nature doesn't have a will. Nature, by definition, can't make mistakes. Nature just happens. Here's another interesting kind of take on that. The definition of nature is the phenomena of the physical world collectively. Humans are a product of nature, so even if we killed everything else, nature would still live in us. Also, even if people are saying the world would be better off without humans, you can be sure they won't be killing themselves to aid that cause. Now here's kind of a standout view. To begin with, nature didn't make you. God made you. He loves you, and he had a purpose for you. You are made for more. God loved the world so much that he did this. He gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him will have eternal life. And the last one here, humans can destroy things in nature. Humans can protect things in nature. So are humans the biggest danger to things in nature? Well, yes, they have the potential to destroy all living things on the top surface of the planet if they wanted to. But humans have great potential to help things in nature as well. Humans are effectively the only chance other living things have to survive something like a giant asteroid, climate change, and other events that can cause worldwide events of extinction. Now, as tempting as it might be to respond to this spectrum of different opinions about mankind in general, I'd like to pose another question. Let's say we believe that so many folks love John Lennon's song is because they would like the world to be a better place, and that sounds good, and it feels good to say so. Granted. I think if you asked 100 people the questions, are humans the greatest mistake made by nature, you'd probably get 120 different answers. So this is my question. How do you establish a social order where people, each with a different idea about how things are and how they should be, can get along with each other and thrive because of it? Let's not mistake this. The nature of human conscious thought has each of us experience life differently. This is not going to change. So what do we rally around to live as one? Nations? Religion? Love? Mankind? Just imagining it and joining the chorus? Okay, imagine the world can be a better place. By all means, yes. But do we imagine that someone else will do it or that it will just happen someday? What if I posed the question to myself? What if I began today with my own heart and my own mind in that little corner of the world I personally occupy? Make it better right there, right now. Can I do that? Even more, am I willing to do that? Because the truth is, I can't give away what I don't have. I think the world will get better as each of us do. Here's the thing. I think we were made to do precisely this. In Genesis, in the first chapter, verse 26, it says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So, God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. Then God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the sea, over the birds of the air, over every living thing that moves on the earth." And God said, "See, I have given you every herb that yields seed, which is on the face of the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed. To you it shall be for food." I don't want to miss something that often gets missed, especially when people talk about patriarchy and how the ancients dominated women. God said to them, that is to the male and the female of the species, "Be fruitful," etc. He didn't say it to Adam alone. He spoke to both of them. This implies a partnership, one in which they would fulfill this mandate together. It's easy to take this statement and gloss over it. You might simply take it to mean, as is so often surmised, make babies and populate the planet. A Jewish friend of mine, when I pointed this out to him, said he'd never heard the "fill the earth and subdue it" part. All he's been taught is be fruitful and multiply. Now, in that case, God may as well have been talking to rabbits. In making them, creating them in his own image, I believe this may mean that God, as God is a spirit, that man, in the image and likeness of God, is capable of spiritual experiences. The modern science tells us that man has feelings, emotions, and instincts quite like other mammals. Certainly in 12-step, we recognize that these instincts are perfectly necessary and right and surely God-given. However, that's not the entire picture. Our experience includes, but goes beyond that of our mammalian cousins. In his landmark work, The Varieties of Religious Experience, William James brings some scientific rigor and objectivity to a level of human experience which, even today, we do not fully understand. Yet the empirical evidence shows that these kinds of divine or spiritual experiences do happen to many people. Some are quite profound and transformational. It is part of the human experience of consciousness. It does not appear that animals share this with us, despite what we do have in common. I have for many years wondered about the ways in which we connect, interact, and share consciousness with each other and with the world around us. I think it's a profound mystery. When Jesus points out that a man and a woman become one flesh, well, what exactly does that mean? There are surely parts of this we're conscious of. I'm married. I feel a connectedness with my wife. But as so many other elements of our lives and relationships, I suspect that it is far more complex, extensive, and wonderful than we can observe or measure, at least at this stage. For example, there's much we don't know or understand about the electromagnetic radiation we emit, or if that's all that takes place. So, aside from the obvious characteristics of monogamous bonding, what might be happening within the spectrums of energy which we don't directly encounter with our five senses? Well, again, this is much too deep and complex a subject for the purposes of this book. but in raising questions about how we relate to each other, taking into considerations things which we do not see, which may decidedly affect what we do see, that merits our attention. I believe the Bible gives us clear benchmarks to align ourselves with this realm and to keep in harmony with it. When Jesus spoke to Nicodemus, a teacher of Israel who came to him in the middle of the night, he mentioned about being born again. He touched very lightly on this, on the impact of the spiritual realm on our experience of life and its potential to affect us. I think the key part of it is his comparison to the Spirit, this comparison of the Spirit to the wind. Wind is something we hear, we feel its motion, we see its action around us. But we don't see where it originates, nor do we know where it will end up. The spiritual dimensions of life are just like that. We don't see them. We really don't know where they begin or where they will take us or where we'll end up. And we don't see gravity either, but we feel its effect. But until we are alive to this realm of experience, we, like the Romans or Greeks or other ancient cultures, tend to project our own selfish and capricious nature on life's events and live in fear or denial of all that we can't see. Whereas before the events of Genesis 3 and in God's design, I believe we were meant to live in harmony with this power. Okay. Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. I want to look at this passage from a very particular perspective, which is anthropological and cultural. Yes, it's a spiritual statement. Yes, the Bible treats it as a spiritual reflection. But I want to suggest that it's a fourfold mandate for humankind. One which can be observed, particularly when looking back across human history. I would further take this into account. What if an intelligent designer wanted a species capable of partnering with him in purposes he might have? What if those purposes related to reasons for bringing about the world and the universe that we find before us? Were that the case, might you not credibly suggest this designer would have a vested interest in preparing said species for such a role? Now, I don't pretend or presume to speak for God as to what his purposes might be. I do, however, speculate that it may ultimately have to do with enterprises beyond this planet. I think that's why a show like Star Trek resonates with so many people. The Bible does hint at such things. I'll share some of my thoughts on this later. I also think that this designer is patient, and that these purposes, at least for him, are not time-bound. 6,000 or 7,000 years to master the art of creating and maintaining healthy civilizations seems reasonable, given that mastery of anything takes significant time. We see this in the 10,000 hours typically required for gaining proficiency of a craft or a skill. Does it then seem unreasonable that even 10,000 years might be required for real competence in collaborative, global, technologically advanced civilization? I see this fourfold mandate as relating to the ages of our human history. Historian Yuval Harari, in his book Sapiens, A Short History of Mankind, follows our species through 4 very distinct epochs. He's an evolutionist, and this informs his thought. However, many of his observations, just as those of Darwin, are quite reasonable, insightful, and useful, while some of his conclusions are driven by his worldview and are debatable. I am not faulting either man for this. I'm simply taking it into account. Harari's designations follow four shifts in mankind's development as understood from archaeological findings. They are: 1, the cognitive revolution, characterized by the emergence of what he calls fictive language and the use of fire. Another way of saying this is the ability to conceptualize things which are not visible or which don't exist in the natural world. This is the human distinctive. Cooking food and other uses of fire is also something that only humans do. Next followed the agricultural revolution. Its major features are the domestication of plants and animals and the advent of permanent settlements. He also includes in this stage the introduction of money and trade. Next followed the agricultural revolution. Its major features are the domestication of plants and animals and the advent of permanent settlements. He also includes in this stage the introduction of money and trade. This is followed by the scientific revolution, where humankind admits its ignorance and begins to acquire unprecedented power. The entire planet becomes a single historical arena. Finally, the Industrial Revolution. Family and community are replaced by state and market. Humans transcend the boundaries of planet Earth. In terms of these epochs, they do seem to be consistent with the kind of flow of development implied in the Genesis mandate. Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. It's fascinating to me that this mandate can be identified in archaeological evidence and recorded history, given it was presented prior to some of these events. We'll take a little deeper look. Hunter-gatherers came first. In order to stay alive, Homo sapiens would have to learn to feed, shelter, and protect themselves from the elements, predatory animals, and hostile neighbors. Learning to work and to do so in an effective manner in small bands occupying rigorous and often hostile surroundings would require the accumulation of sophisticated survival and relationship skills and language. Even at this early stage, however, I think more was afoot. It was in this period that humans advanced significantly in the use of fire and tools to supplement their limited physical abilities. In Galatians 5:22 and 23, the Apostle Paul offers a description of one aspect of fruitfulness, which he termed the fruit of the Spirit. Let's say, for the purposes of this conversation, fruitfulness encompasses the results of many different aspects of how an individual operates in life, both practically and relationally. It's not too much of a stretch to consider that even in this early stage of human development, trust, honor, and rewards were earned by those who were fruitful in this sense. Now, of particular interest to me is Harari's idea about fiction. Throughout the book, he expands on the idea of mankind's capacity to create cultural fictions, of which he includes religion, corporations, and national identities. In his words, fiction isn't bad, it's vital. Without commonly accepted stories about things like money, states, or corporations, no complex human society can function. And he goes on later, when we forget they are fiction, though, we lose touch with reality. In this, I think he actually highlights the foundational problem which is described in the 3rd chapter of Genesis. Not that I think for a moment he intended to do so, but it is precisely the departure from reality, from the understanding that an intelligent designer of the order we're considering would have the final word about what is real and what is not, that's paramount. And further, that the nature of the consciousness with which we have been endowed permit us to create narratives about our experience that can end up being untrue. This is the basis of what the Bible calls sin. I believe it's the foundational dishonesty upon which every other human problem and deficiency is predicated. I suspect this is why Jesus referred to Satan as the father of lies. A lie can only exist as a lie in a conscious mind capable of distinguishing what is true and what is not. This appears to be the state which the Bible in Genesis initially depicts our species. I think it is worth noting that in the center of the garden there were two trees. Further, Jesus, when he speaks about men and their character, likens them to trees, whose fruit reveals their nature. You shall know them by their fruits. I do think the Bible holds something for us regarding similarities in the manner in which a tree and a human grow and mature over long periods of time. We'll look at that further in the next chapter. As mankind became adept at these skills, other opportunities presented themselves. For example, one hunter-gatherer band might become good at making clothing of skins because they were really good hunters, and that might produce more than they needed. Another group might be really good at gathering certain kinds of edible plants, and they might also accumulate more than they could use. As they encountered each other, they recognized that they each might benefit from the other, so they traded what the multiplication of their group skills together had realized. In the same way, they began to understand things like many hands make light work. They saw their efforts could be multiplied and they could take on larger tasks as they learned to cooperate and multiply their skills and acquired knowledge. The use of conceptual language does emerge as a key component of this process. Humans use conceptual language to share, multiply their ideas. As multiplication skills develop, techniques like animal domestication and farming emerged. It was a significant change. Up until then, it was normal for humans to live in small bands of maybe 100 to 150 and move around based on weather, hunting, and food gathering variables. As men engaged in farming, they soon realized the value of remaining in one place. They saw that living in close proximity meant more available labor and resources to share, but also because staying in one place made them more vulnerable to outsiders, they found safety in numbers. As such settlements became larger, stronger groups often sought to take advantage of weaker ones, or one leader would offend another, or one group encroached on the territory of another, eliciting retaliation. Here is where settlement defense and military practices also began to advance, by necessity. The agricultural revolution, as some call it, will consider to be entrenched in the multiplication sphere of our genetic mandate. As agriculture grew in sophistication and scale, written language came into practice. Archaeological evidence points to cuneiform as the first known written language, and it seems to have been used, at least initially, to record transactions resulting from commerce and land ownership. But it wasn't long before it became useful for other things, such as recording historical events and things like art depicting the human experience in stories. As the structure of language improved, so did the ability to transmit and develop complex ideas. Commerce is clearly one of the primary agencies of the spread of civilization. Farm settlements expanded to become towns. Towns which had harbors or other geographical advantages or an abundance of one or more resources for trade multiplied until they filled a region. One example of this, which we'll look at more closely, is salt and its role in the ancient world. It was at this stage that the cultural narratives of the inhabitants of these regions assumed increasing importance. Religion, social mores, shared development and use of technology, and the in-depth recording of events became possible, this was a function of written language. But it was also an outgrowth of the need to fill in the gaps and solve the problems brought about by multiplication. During this era, human civilization began to fill the earth. In Egypt, Persia, Greece, Rome, China, and other parts of the world, societies were expanding and undergoing dynamic political and economic change. This had the effect of spreading culture within these regions. I'm going to put a bookmark in it here. We're going to come back to this in the next session. Thank you for listening.